All right, so today we're going to be talking about tree pruning. For each of these slides, I'm just going to move over to the side of the room and just manually hit it and then give the presentation. I want to make sure I'm out of the way. But we have 4 important things to keep in mind when we're out and about in the orchard pruning trees. First thing, safety first. Really, these shears, they have a little locking mechanism. Keep that engaged, at all times when we're not using the shears. Kind of simple, but it's important in the long run. When we're pruning, it's important to not remove more than about 30%, or we like to aim for about 25% of the canopy in any growing season. So the maximum amount of limbs and canopy we want to remove is 25% for the entire year. Just generally speaking, it's helpful to keep in mind an idea of airflow within the canopy. We're trying to open up a lot of the branches. Let me retry that. And it's important to open up the canopy for more airflow. This prevents diseases from occurring and lowers the pressure of insect pests. So generally, when we're pruning, we want to remove some of these interior branches, and we'll get into specifics in a minute. And some of those specifics, keep the shape of the tree in mind. Generally speaking, we have 2 different shapes that we work with depending on which type of fruit tree we're pruning. These are some of our basic tools, hand shears, loppers for big branches. They're anvil style and more like bypass style. Bypass style over here. It's kind of like scissors versus a little more hefty tool for bigger branches. Just kind of knowing your tools a little bit. This is the most important thing to remember for tree pruning, the 4 Ds. So we want to remove first dead limbs, diseased limbs, damaged limbs, and deranged limbs. And we'll get into what all of those things mean in just a moment with another picture. But the 4 Ds are really important for our tree pruning. When we're talking about deranged branches, we're talking about 2 branches that would rub against one another, kind of like this. They often grow up vertically. These are also known as water sprouts that grow vertically. But you want to remove limbs that are rubbing each other so that over time they don't create wounds that insects or disease could injure the tree from. That's kind of the basic idea there. Of course, dead branches, those are going to be really brittle. So if you're uncertain if a branch is alive or not, it can be really hard in the dormant season, but see if it's a little bit flexible. Just an easy way to test. Another thing that I would encourage removing are all of these suckers. So suckers grow from the base of a tree. They often grow from the rootstock of a tree, whereas water sprouts are similar types of branches that grow vertically, but they are just the tree seeking more light, and it really closes up the canopy, and they don't become really strong fruit-bearing limbs. So that's kind of our idea. So here's another example of water sprouts. They are growing straight up from a little knot in the tree here. We want to remove those. Another example of a deranged branch. You can see that this branch is going to be rubbing over the long term with this other branch way above it. And they're both going to just rub their bark off, which is like a protective layer. Another example of water sprouts, those are limbs, branches that grow straight up from larger branches, and they just don't become large fruit-bearing branches. They just restrict airflow over time. When we're talking about diseases, you can sometimes see gummosis, which is like an extrusion of kind of sap, often like for our trees, often orangish colored. and over the winter it'll turn into like an amber color. And we want to remove leaves that have, or we want to remove branches that have this like gummosis. That's a disease we want to remove. Or if there are large cankers, which are kind of like little crevices or holes in the tree, we want to remove those as well. So those would be our diseased branches. So when we're talking about the shape of a tree, I mean, this is kind of our goal. We're taking out a lot of the messy stuff in the middle so that we can end up with a beautiful tree like this some years down the road. Pruning is a process that occurs throughout multiple years. Each year in the spring, early spring, while trees are still dormant before bud break, so this is like February, January would be ideal as well. We are pruning the tree so that the next year of growth will be moving in the right direction to form the shape that we're looking for. And the two shapes we want, let's see here. The two shapes we want are a base shape and a central leader or modified central leader shape. So, or what that means is for an apple and a pear tree, we want a strong central line of growth from the base of the tree to the top of the tree. So for apple and pear trees, we want to encourage a central leader or modified central leader general form of the tree. So a central leader is kind of the traditional thing that we think about when we think of apple trees, or just a large tree with a strong base trunk that goes all the way to the top. It's just a strong central body. And off of that, we have those 45 to 90 degree kind of branches coming off of that central leader. That's kind of the general shape we're aiming for with apples and pears. Modified central leader is what happens when like the top breaks off. Well, when that happens, we train another branch to take that top root. So it's not the perfect form, but it's nature. And that's our modified central leader. For our stone fruits, so that's plums, peaches, nectarines, anything with that really big pit in it, stone fruit, like a cherry as well, we would want to encourage a vase shape. So a big kind of V, think of kind of a wine glass type of a shape. So over here, you can see our vase shape, modified central leader, where we have cut off the top, encouraging some growth to the sides, and we have that central leader that grows straight up to the top. Over here, we have our vase shape example. This is a peach tree. You can see that the branches start making that base really low to the ground. This opens up a lot of airflow, and it's very important for peaches, which are so soft. And this is our goal. For apple trees, it's kind of our goal. We want these kind of standard shapes in our mature trees, and so that's where our pruning comes in hand. For little trees, this is kind of hard to gauge. What does that look like? Well, here's an example of a peach tree that has some great pruning on it. It's set up to be branching really fairly low to the ground, even though these branches are so thin and small. It's branching out like a vase pretty well. And over here we have, this is another vase shape. Here's another example of our vase shape. You can see it branches out laterally, just very gently from when we're pruning trees, we're trying to open up airflow, and this is kind of an example of what we're doing over time. So the first year we're stopping the tree and growing straight up. We want to encourage a different type of growth. Slowly. Okay, these are two examples of a central leader form with smaller trees. So you can really see here, we have a strong trunk of the tree, and these really nice 45 to 90-ish degree angles on our branches coming out of that central trunk. Okay. diseased limbs, dead limbs, deranged limbs, so those limbs that rub each other, and damaged limbs, so if they're kind of broken or cracked. Those are the first limbs we want to remove. And really, above all though, do not remove more than 25% of the canopy in any growing season. That would lead to like undue stress on the tree and a less favorable outcome over the long term. We are making a cut on a branch that's too large for our pruning shears or our loppers. I want to encourage everyone to make 3 cuts, actually. There's a strategy here. You make your first cut underneath 2 other cuts. So the idea is, if this branch were to break as you're cutting it, or not make a clean cut, the bark won't peel off the entire, way down the tree as the branch falls. So you make a cut underneath to cut the bark and the first couple layers of wood or the branch. And then you make your second cut exterior to that. And just cut it all the way through. It can be a little gnarly, a little messy, and that's where your third cut comes in to clean it up. And sometimes it's better to use a saw for this stuff, just depending on the size of the branch. When we are cutting branches, it's important to cut at like a 45-degree angle, so that water doesn't end up pooling. Just even little droplets can pool on the ends of these branches, and a 45-degree cut just prevents problems from occurring in the future. If you have water kind of sitting for a prolonged period on a branch, on wood, that wood expands, becomes softer, becomes more accessible to insects and then disease. We don't want to cut a branch higher inward or more inward, more interior than the root collar. We want to maintain that root collar. It's part of the tree's natural formation, and it's just important to keep that intact. The branches we want to maintain, we want to encourage to become fruit-bearing branches, have a degree, an angle of more than 40 degrees and less than 90 degrees. Those are our strongest branches, and that's what we want to encourage. So if you think of, a 90-degree turn, we want, about that angle or a little bit less of a sharp right angle. So remember again, the 4 Ds, 45-degree cuts, 45 to 90-degree branches. These are some helpful things.